Yeah, Mohammadreza, I can see you there. So Mohammadreza is at the opposite end of the scale. He's very new to the PhD. He's coming up to his first review point. His project or talk title is Interactive Storytelling for Virtual Reality Medium by Real Walking Inside Virtual Story World. So thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Hi, everyone. And I should say that today is the Teachers' Day in my country. So I felicitate this day to all the teachers here, especially my supervisor, Mel and Sharon. And just bear me a moment to share my slide. Can you see my slide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. As the Dave says, the title of my project is about interactive storytelling for virtual reality medium by real walking inside virtual storyboard. And as you see, actually the project is about enabling audiences to walk freely inside the movie scenes by virtual reality techniques. And I call these audiences wonder audiences, and I will explain why I call them wonder audiences. The aims of this project is about, firstly, observing how these audiences identify themselves inside in this virtual story world and how they interact with the pre-recorded contents inside this virtual environment. And then by having some result and some measurement of their actions and their interaction, I will articulate some convention for interactive storytelling by finding how a director, or in this case, a designer, can impose his aesthetic values in this virtual story world, and how much is the level of agency for these audiences to interact with the pre-recorded contents. So this project faces three main questions. In the first step for audiences, it is about the change that happened in the way that they perceive the contents, their perception condition inside this virtual story world, how they read the images inside this virtual and immersive environment. And for the director or designers, the question is that what are the conventions to design this storyboard? It is about how they can make a cinematographic illusion for these wonder audiences and lead them to read these contents and interact with them. And for the interaction, the question is how the interaction of the wonder audiences result in a unique experience. It is the aim of any interactive VR application, because the aim of interaction is to invite audiences to reuse the application for several times, because each time it would be a different experience for them. So firstly, we have to see what changed in our audiences and why they become wonder audiences. I categorize their change in two categories. The first for their perception condition, for the change in their coordination as a perceiver of the dramatic content. And it is because that they emancipate from the camera's viewpoint and build their own viewpoint. The camera in making movie is the tool of translation. Director put audiences in a subjective position or an objective position, put them in the POV of a character, part of a story, or give them an overall view of the story to make the movie impersonal for everyone. But now we don't have camera. And this is the audiences that have the tool of translation to find the movement. And camera in movie are the center of every movement inside the virtual storyboard and inside the storyboard actually, because every movement, every dramatic movement happened in front of the camera. And in the case that we don't have the camera and have wanderer audiences, actually we eliminate the cinematographic consciousness in the conventional way. So we have to find the tools to rebuild this in a new way. And the second category is about the feeling of duration. In cinema, this is the montage that creates an image of time in the audience's mind. Montage is the putting shots beside to create an image for the time of the dramatic events. Now, our audiences experience pre-recorded content in real time because they start to have a natural body movement inside this virtual storyboard. So the tool of expression, which is montage in the cinema, now is in their hand. So making a wanderer audiences means that we hand them the tool of translation and tool of expression to find the meanings and watch the movie and find the meanings of dramatic events. So the main objectives and for this research is about, firstly, how we can lead audiences to read exact dramatic event inside an immersive shot, and then how can we aware them about the interaction possibilities that they can do with this pre-recorded contents. Actually, this is the objectives of every VR movies and interactive VR movies, but I use a Deleuzian approach to find the answer for these questions, which articulated in the book Cinema 1 Movement Image and Cinema 2 Time Image, to find answer for my questions. And to find how, firstly, how audiences read the images. And for the passive rule of audiences, as the perceiver, they start to read the image because they feel themselves inside the virtual storyboard, inside the virtual environment. And this is the subjective presence in virtual reality. And this subjective presence, and actually the level of presence during the experience, is not constant. It's changed during the experience because the emotional contribution of the audiences with the dramatic contents changed during the experience. And it would result in the change of their feeling of duration for any movement or any change inside virtual storyboard. And I use feeling of duration as an indicator to find out how they generalize the virtual environment, and it means how they read the images inside this immersive shot. And what is the feeling of duration? Sorry. The feeling of duration, actually, we talk about two types of duration. We have two types of duration. The first, there is an inner duration, which is about our feeling of the time, and there's a outer or external duration, which is about the changes in our environment. So feeling of duration constitutes of two duration. First, the specific weight that we endure to find the change and the movement inside the material world, which is, in our case, is the virtual storyboard, and then the time that in our mind we search and retrieve our memories to pick up the signs and movements and elaborate them and find meaning for them. So the feeling of duration is a combination of these two. And by comparing this internal feeling of duration and the external duration for every movement inside the virtual storyboard, we can understand how they generalize environment, how they elaborate the movement, and how they use their background knowledge, their memories, retrieve their memories to understand the movements and have an idea about new environment that they immerse in, and understand how much they engage emotionally with the narratives, because the aim of the telling a story is to engage audiences with the narratives and imposing the aesthetic value. That's the tool of the director. And for interaction approach, the active role of audiences, actually here interaction is about their objective presence. I hand them tools, the tool of translation, the camera, and the tool of expression, the montage. And now the task is for them to find the causality. This is their objective presence, which relate to fulfilling the task. So this finding causality result in the feeling of indetermination. That's this term, I bring this term from Bergson argument. And this feeling of indetermination inspire audiences to more interact with the virtual environment. And this is the aim of interaction, actually, and reuse the application for several times. Because now they have to find the causality and they have to find the meaning for everything inside this virtual storyboard. And what is this feeling of indetermination which shaped my interaction approach? Firstly, we have to consider the change which has happened here for designing the interaction. We go from an episodic revealing of narrative, which bounded to camera, and because we show the narrative through the camera, to an open world experience of narrative, which we don't have any camera here. So giving the audiences option A or B is no relevant here because we don't have camera, and we need a new approach to design the interaction. And this approach is to enable audiences to use their tools in a way that they can manipulate and change their position inside this storyboard. And this approach comes from this argument in Bergson theory, which is about the realities and possibilities. Bergson says all normal function of mind is about thinking about some possibility of something till it happen and become reality. So all the time we expect a predetermined reality because we anticipate it before it happened. Bergson says that the feeling of indetermination and free will arises when we firstly face a reality and then start to scrutinize its possibilities and in its causalities and find out why this happened. And we can find several answers for this. And this is the time that we have the feeling of indetermination. So for designing my interaction, I actually emancipate my audiences as the agent from any limitation so they can walk freely inside the virtual environment or jumping inside the virtual environment by using any transportation technique and change their spatial coordination in this storyboard. And also, they can manipulate the timeline. They have the control of the time. They can pause and play the movie. they can do fast forward or slow motion in the timeline, or backward to scrutinize why this dramatic incident happened. And that's why I call them wanderer audiences, because they are free to go everywhere and in any time in this virtual storyboard. They do not just walking freely. They can change their temporal coordination inside this immersive environment. And based on that, I consider the generic elements of VR movies to design everything in a VR movie, the spatial temporal coordination of perceiver and perceiving object, everything inside this immersive environment. And based on that, the designer can decorate its temporal elements, the narratives movement, inside this space, and wanderer audiences now can manage their spatial temporal coordination to perceive and interact with this virtual environment. And my method is a combination of a scientific and creative work. I do research in the theories of about function of human minds and find hypotheses, and then based on this hypothesis, I have the Deleuzian approach to create some narratives, and by these narratives, I make some practices and then screen them to a group of participants, which I group them into experienced and non-experienced audiences, because here we talk about the importance of experience in generalizing the virtual environment. When any audiences face a new situation, and in our case, immerse inside a virtual reality, now use their background knowledge to identify himself and interact with in this virtual environment. So the main group of my audiences is experienced and non-experienced audiences. Then I measure their presence level in two ways. Firstly, as an objective measurement, I will monitor their action during experiencing the practice. I will use eye tracking and pose estimation technique to trace their actions, and EEG devices to trace the change of their feeling and their emotional contribution to the narratives. And after the experience, I have a subjective measurement by inviting them to short interviews or filling in questionnaires and surveys, and ask them about their thoughts and feeling during the experience, and about the feeling of duration for any incident, and then compare it with the other shots and to have an image about the feeling of duration for any audiences. So I have a qualitative and quantitative analysis of the presence of my audiences in a practice, and this data will help me to refine and decorate the next practice. And the use of this result, firstly, will be helpful to find the agenda of designing a narrative structure for such an application for open world immersive cinema. And because we have audiences which have natural body movement and interact with the virtual content in a natural way, so we can work on the cause of the motion sickness, which can be a vestibular problem in the inner ear or perceptive disorder. And by understanding and having an image about this cause of motion sickness, then we can find a way to expand the length of VR movies and making feature length VR movies, and have an image about the proper time for any immersive shot, the time that any audiences and in general needs to identify the virtual environment and get involved with the contents. And because we work on the background knowledge, the retrieving process of memories, now we can have some idea about designing some application, VR application to diagnosing the earliest stage Alzheimer and dementia. And by now I did my first practice. Actually, it's still active. So I'm doing my first practice, which is about the grouping audiences based on their experience rate, age, and gender. And the correlation is the engagement type emotionally, to what extent emotionally or intellectually. And I use the method of Professor Smith's dual processing model to analyze the retrieving memory process for audiences and compare it with their level of presence, which I use the specific questionnaire to measure the level of presence quantitatively, and compare it with the feeling of duration for every audiences. And by now my findings shows that more experience rate result in a slower feeling of duration and less emotional engagement with the contents. And for non-experienced participants, it shows that the age is the important factor, because being older results in a slower feeling of duration and less emotional engagement with the narrative and better identifying of the virtual environment. This is the link of the presentation, the poster presentation I sent for the Communities and Communication Conference. And you can watch my result and my method by watching this video. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mohammadreza.